Hello, everyone. I hope everyone is having a beautiful Thursday. Thank you so much for joining us. And I am getting ready to launch off into this next session, our panel discussion around restorative practices at work, bridging the multi-generational workplace gap. So we are getting our panelists up here spotlit, I guess, for everyone. So while that happens, I'm just going to do a quick introduction and go through a few of our housekeeping items, and then I will have our panelists introduce themselves. Before I get started, I should probably introduce myself as well. My name is Melissa Ash, and I am the Associate Dean at the Administration at the IIRP, the International Institute for Restorative Practices. Very excited to be here with our panelists, Sloane, Stephen, and Frida, who will have a moment to introduce themselves in just a second. So sit back. In the meantime, while you're here listening, welcome to the Restorative Practices at Work, Bridging the Multi-Generational Workplace Gap. We are joined by three incredible panelists who are addressing this gap in their work specifically. The conversation today will move from past, present to future. Similar to how we do things in restorative practices, past, present, and future, exploring a key question, which is, how does the field of restorative practices help us to address these global, national, and local challenges that are impacting the well-being of our most vulnerable citizens? So that is what is top of mind. Before I introduce our panelists, I want to give a huge thank you to our conference sponsor, our Open Society Foundation, who has just been very gracious and generous for us, as well as our event sponsor, Design Learning, for making this event possible. You're going to be seeing some stuff in the chat, so please feel free to check that out. But let me tell you a little bit about Design Learning. Design Learning's vision is to create workplaces and communities that work for the common good of all through conversations to consult, convene, and empower. The work is guided by a belief in an alternative narrative which values individual choice, accountability, co-creation, and the power of invitation over a mandate. So that being said, please, if you have not joined a panel discussion thus far in the conference, we have been utilizing the chat to say where we are. Where are you joining us from? I see some of you are already doing that, which is awesome. It means that we're developing a ritual. So please put in the chat where you're joining from so we can see the beautiful spread and span of this conference. So please utilize the chat. We want you to we really want you to utilize the chat and be, participating actively that way. When you chat, I do want to say, be sure to select all panelists and attendees so that way we can all see it and make sure that it is visible for everyone. Remember that closed captioning is available for this session if you choose to select it. So that is down on your Zoom bar, which is that way, or it might be up depending on where you're at. We also want to say that this session is being interpreted, so you are welcome to use interpretation. Also select in your Zoom bar. We do ask that if you have questions for our panelists, we will do a brief Q&A at the end. Please use the Q&A feature, because what we have found in panels is that the chat is vibrant and beautiful about what is being said. And then we sometimes lose track of the questions because everyone is responding, which is super exciting, but also very difficult to sift through. So utilize the Q&A feature with your questions so that way we can hold those for the panelists at the Q&A time. And we, first and foremost, hope you enjoy this session. So that being said, I talked a lot. I'm going to allow my panelists to talk some, which is a crazy notion, but I am going to ask for Stephen to introduce himself first, and then we will go to Sloane and Frida. So Stephen, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you for that welcome, and Melissa, thank you for the great work that you're doing so far. And IIRP, thank you for allowing me to be part of this panel. I'm Stephen Lozada. I'm the managing partner of a small company called Upward Mindset, where we have a mission. It's a personal mission and organizational one to eradicate conversational poverty in all its fronts. And I'm taking that very seriously as I do my work with private sector and public sector organizations. And I'm having a good time doing it. Most of the time I spend with executives doing executive coaching and team performance coaching in the workplace. And the way I got introduced to IIRP was some years ago, I found Flawless Consulting and the work of Peter Black, Design Learning, which is one of the sponsors here. And I found that he did a video and was part of a world conference in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And I started watching the videos and I started asking myself, where is this IIRP? Because I am a resident of Allentown, Pennsylvania. And I fell in love with what was happening. I began following, and then I had the privilege of facilitating a Flawless Consulting workshop for some of the leaders at IIRP, where I also fell in love with the folks there, and I took some IIRP courses as well. And I think that this is a great practice, restorative practices, and what IIRP is doing to really start to eradicate conversational poverty in all of our organizations and institutions around the world. So that's a little bit about who I am, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Stephen, for that introduction of yourself, and thanks, MASH, and to the entire IIRP team for inviting me to participate today. My name is Sloane Johnson, and I hail from the beautiful sunny islands of Bermuda. I am the Community and Development Coordinator for the Coalition for the Protection of Children here. The Coalition is a not-for-profit organization who advocates on behalf of children island-wide. We provide a variety of programs for both children and parents supporting those kids. And restorative practices plays a role, an integral part of what we do every single day, whether it be through mediation or running circles in different areas of, what we do in schools and workplaces and different things like that. Restorative practices touches every piece of what we do here at the Coalition for the Protection of Children. So I got involved roughly about 5 years ago after discovering the benefits of restorative practices and how it could help to move not just what I do on a day-to-day basis, but what our organization does on a day-to-day basis forward. So I do thank you for the opportunity to be here with you guys today.
Thank you, Sloane. Wonderful to have you here. I'm Frida Rundell, originally from South Africa, but I've been here 16 years. I'm a professor here at IIRP. I always say I'm a pig rolling in mud and enjoying it. And I'm a teacher and a lifelong learner. And I love being able to actually get the space to be with people and hear their stories. So I work basically from a developmental side and from a narrative side, listening. And that's where I enjoy myself. Mash?
Thank you, Frida, Sloane, and Stephen. It's great to be here with you all. I mean, beautiful minds, a lot of learning, hopefully not just for our audience, but from ourselves too, as we walk through these questions. It reminds me, I should probably mention that people call me Mash. If you haven't figured it out, it's my first initial last name, and it's a nickname that pretty much, I think people know me as Mash and don't realize that I have an actual name of Melissa that I was given at birth, but you're welcome to call me Mash, go for it. The panel will do the same exact thing. So don't be confused if they say Mash, it's not a hidden person, it's just me. So I'm very excited to be here and to be able to host and facilitate this discussion. So, our title for this webinar is a little bit lengthy, right? It's everything from restorative practices at work, which is kind of a pun, which I really enjoy. It's at work, meaning it's working, but also at work because we're talking about the workplace. So that's exciting. But what do we mean by bridging the multi-generational workplace gap? And so before we kick off, I'm going to toss this first question to Frida to answer first. And then, of course, Stephen and Sloane, if you have items to add, feel free to hop in. But when it comes to talking about the multi-generational workplace gap, meaning the different, attributes that different generations bring to the workplace, let's talk about what those strengths and challenges are. So Frida, my question to you is, what are those strengths and what are those challenges that different generations invite into the workplace? And then there's a second part that I'll remind you all of, which is how do we promote those differences and those strengths rather than manage them within and across these generations. So strengths and challenges, and how do we promote those differences and those similarities? So Frida, hand it off to you.
Well, generations are usually seen in 17 to 22-year spans, and they're usually a group of people who've generally had an experience that has been critical to their life in early childhood. So many times it's not about age, it's about what they carry through the many generations. And I think our traditional one is, of course, the traditional generation, which is 1922 to 1945. I just miss it. I'm 1946, but that doesn't matter. I'm still there. But you're going to find that this generation tends to be very much more security conscious. Promotion is based on longevity, and they wait to be told. They respect position. And many times they have great difficulty with diversity issues and taking initiatives, and perhaps also computer stuff, but they should be retired by now. So, you know, we're hoping that that's coming. I think the next generation, the baby boomers, which is where I happen to be, 1946, and I think it's just after the war, and you see that many of the people, 1946 to 1964, generally are known as the baby boomers. And you'll find they have a relentless pursuit of goals. They want to change. Change is inevitable, but they don't particularly like it. So it takes them time to be able to get used to it. And then, of course, they actually far prefer casual team relationships, but they're very accountable, they have clear communication, and they're very service orientated. They live to work. That's where I am. I live to work. Okay. But the downside or the challenges for the baby boomers are really about technology, the need to fit in. You know, they want everybody to fit in. They don't like that conflict. And they have problems too with diversity issues. So, you know, I know what I've experienced in my lifetime. I kind of bridge all of this, but they also don't need instant gratification, which is interesting in the modern day and age when you see perhaps the Generation X, which is the favored generation in terms of 1965 to 1980. And these work to live. In other words, it's money you're getting, and that's what you do. And if you need to change, they want promotion on ability, and they have computer routines that they know how to do. Their fun-filled attitude of wanting fun, and they need to be heard, and they need a voice. So that generation is probably predominant in our workplace, but you find that they're challenged. Their challenges are, oh my goodness, they use jargon, technical jargon. I have to constantly say, what do you mean by that? And the difficulty is many times they have a great discomfort with trying to collaborate with everybody. And there's a kind of a lack of loyalty. If they need to change, they'll change because it's. And then we have the Generation Y, which is 1981 to 1997. And of course, the millennials and Gen Me's are ongoing too. But this generation loves to be orientated towards teamwork. They're hardworking, multitaskers. They need structure, and they need to be respected and worthy of a title or a position. If you're not worthy, you shouldn't have it. It's not about longevity. And the relationships with bosses, they like to have relationships with their bosses. Of course, the downside to the Generation Y and of course the millennials that are coming in is informal texting. They want to connect through, you know, WhatsApp, all of these, it's instant. I know with my granddaughter, she only answers if I get connected with WhatsApp. Otherwise, there's nothing. And it's always one word or a meme. So I've had to learn to do that kind of thing. They lack sometimes problem solving because they want everything instant, or they're going to Google it, find the answer and put it in. And you ask them what they've learned, nothing. Their loyalty is not there, the challenge is there. And sometimes it's, if technology doesn't work, they're lost. So there are challenges, but I think being able to recognize that there's no wrong or right about the different generations. I think each generation shows a gap, and then the next generation seemingly fills it. And I think being able to actually acknowledge that is where we need to be. So I'll hand it back to you, Bash.
Thanks. And Stephen or Sloane, any thoughts on those challenges or those abilities? I know I felt a little named when she was reading out Gen Y, because that's where I land, and I'm feeling a level of confidence and shame. So I'm not sure how to sit here, but it's going to be good. So.
Frida, thank you for such a succinct description of the 4 generations. I think that was well done. And I too, as I listened and watched, I had a sense of while I resonate with that, and I also found myself resonating with aspects of all generations, and sort of in the middle, right, between the Gen X and the Gen Y. I like you, I'm kind of on that spot there. And I've had experiences in the workplace with various generations. So I'm going to say that I can actually reinforce experientially what you're sharing here in terms of some of the challenges and strengths. And I guess my concern as I was in the workplace and still am with the generations is that who wants to take ownership and responsibility for sitting in that gap that at the end you mentioned? Who's going to create that sacred space of that gap? And what are we going to do to bring those together, where we leverage the strengths and even the weaknesses, that we acknowledge them? And it seems like there's a challenge there. So I'm wondering what your thoughts might be here in terms of who is sitting in that gap and who will convene the conversations that you're recommending.
I just want to agree with everything that Steve just said. And I too believe that, multi-generational workplaces, there's a ton of value there. As far as who is going to sit in the gap, I think the onus of that actually falls on management, because the manager is the person who has to find a way to bridge the gap between all of these generations and help them to work cohesively. I think that a lot of times, Frida mentioned it all. There's the technological gap, there's the language barrier, there's, but at the same time, you get a good blend of tried and true and fun and new. So if you think about it from a technology perspective, I tell people all the time, and don't hold this against me, I don't think that it's relevant for you to go to college for 4 years to get a degree in computer science. Because by the time you have finished the 4 years of education that you started, the technological field has completely changed, and all of this stuff that you just learned is now irrelevant. So I think that, first of all, we have, the baby boomers and Gen X. They have actually laid the foundation. So that safety and security and longevity that Frida was talking about, they have laid the foundation for a stable workforce. And then here come millennials and Gen Z, and we are just playing on this playground because it's safe and it's secure and it's stable. But that stability was created by the baby boomers and the Gen X's. So it's on a manager to look at what each individual group brings to the table to see what works and what doesn't. Like simple things, there are simple disagreements that can happen in the workplace. Like A baby boomer might think it is absolutely unacceptable for genes to work. Whereas somebody in my age bracket is like, relax, get more work done. So, the compromise to that is maybe smart casual wear Monday through Thursday and dress down day on Friday. So there are different ways that managers can, different approaches that managers can take to bridging those gaps. But I think the onus is definitely on the management.
Thank you, everyone. Sorry, I missed some of your discussions. My Zoom decided to quit, which was fun. But Frida, I wasn't out in the ocean wondering what to do. I was able to get it back up and started. So it is one of those things where I think about, and obviously when we talk about generations, I mean, these are sweeping themes, right? So you may be someone who fits some of the mold, but not all of the mold, or maybe it doesn't fit you at all, depending on how you were brought in your worldview that deals with your experiences. I think for myself, one of the things that really highlights this was the pandemic, right? And the thought of, there was a notion that for baby boomers, no one could work remotely. You must come into the office with 2 feet of snow going uphill both ways. That's definitely one of those things where I walked in the snow to school and we never had snow days. But then the pandemic showed that, wow, we can actually be flexible, which is something that I think the younger generations asked for. And so now we've naturally found this more cohesive, flexible way to support our lives, not just professional lives, but our personal lives. So that being said, quick thank you to Corey for stepping in. Appreciate you. Hopefully I'm here. Fingers crossed. I think Zoom heard me that I was okay with tech and it said, no, you're not. So
you got your back. There's no worries.
The next question is going to be for Stephen. So what are the various generations looking for in today's workforce? What have you to say about that?
Yeah. I have, well, let me just, make sure my mic is unmuted. I have a couple of things to say on this. This is a big deal and a big topic, right? Because the question addresses a common movement that I'm seeing, and I think we may all be seeing in the workforce today, especially following the global pandemic that awakened the world in 2020. And here's the question that I'm seeing lots of responses to in various ways. What do various generations want in the workforce? And how do we create a workplace culture that is diverse, inclusive, and equitable, right? And this topic in and of itself is a source of conflict. But unfortunately, in my opinion, the discourse seems to point to the pandemic as the cause, when I think, in fact, the underpinnings of this movement go a little further back, maybe a lot further back, but I won't go that far back in time. I'm going to find a foreshadow here of where we are by going back to 1996. And I'll borrow from Samuel Huntington's book, The Clash of Civilizations, right? His thesis in that book is that the primary source of conflict in a post-Cold War world will be cultural and religious differences between civilizations, cultural and religious differences. So let me take a creative license and say that what we see and what I see in the workplace is a clash of generations. It's a clash of generations. And the source of the conflict, I think it's still the same. It's a belief system and a culture. So as we just heard Frida share with us, we have, at least three, maybe even 4 generations converging in the workplace today. So I want to address this really quickly and to simplify it, address it on 2 poles, the older generation and the newer generation, whatever that means from wherever you are inside of the generational splits. The older generation, I'm going to generalize here, but the older generation wants acknowledgement and appreciation. I want to be acknowledged for the work that I've done, as Sloane was saying earlier, the foundation that has been established that all of you who follow me are enjoying and building upon. I want to be acknowledged for my participation and contribution to that. And I want to be appreciated for that. There should be some honor and respect, to use terms that seem to be really pertinent to some of the generations. I want honor and respect. So the older generation wants acknowledgement and appreciation. The newer generation, I find, wants voice and choice. Voice and choice. So I am here and I want to be heard. I want to be seen. And I don't want to be necessarily told what to do. Control, command is not a thing that that the newer generation wants. And so not only do I want to be heard and have something to say about whatever is happening and the workplace that I want to generate, but I want to have a choice in what that looks like and how that's designed. And here is that clash of those civilizations. You have at one point, at one pole, I want acknowledgement and appreciation. And another side is I want voice and choice. One of them may be in positions of management or power. A euphemism for management is control. Yeah. And until I am acknowledged and appreciated, I won't give you voice and choice. And the voice and choice is saying, until I'm heard, I'm not going to respect and honor you. This is not fair. You got to where you got to because you were given an opportunity. Give me my opportunity. Where the older generation, as Frida mentioned earlier, they want promotion based on merit. You must deserve it. You must showcase what I've showcased in the past and demonstrate that you went through my path so that you can earn this position here. So there's a clash of generations. And again, it may not be necessarily organizational religion that's there, but when we talk about religion, I'm going to reinterpret it as a belief system. They both believe that they've earned the right, and they both have different reasons for having this right. So those beliefs are clashing, and they both have cultural positions. They seem at odds because this is the way we want to operate. And so let me operate the way I want to operate. Here is the clash. And so I think there has to be, as Frida shared and Sloane elaborated on as well, we need to look at that gap and create this sacred space for conversations to happen. And I believe that those restorative conversations should be happening. And the final point I'll say on this is in the traditional frame, if I'm going to use an image or a symbol, the corporate ladder is not the right way of creating or convening this conversation. We have to get to the corporate circle, listening circles. It's the right shape for the conversations, and there has to be convening power to bring this clash of generations together to really be productive, to be profitable, both socially and economically, and in other ways, in respect of all of our contributions. So that's my complicated answer.
Thanks. And Sloane or Frida, any thoughts?
Sloane, I'll leave it to you.
I mean, again, it's hard to disagree with anything that he said. There's a lot of back and forth. It's almost as if there's a tug of war in regards to which way we should go. And Mash, you mentioned earlier that the pandemic had a lot to do. The pandemic was a springboard, actually, for how we work now. We have the older generation who still can't get on board with the whole working remotely from home, doing everything from your cell phone, working from a coffee shop type vibe. But nowadays, a lot of organizations are doing a blended model. So there's a fit for everyone. We have, the older generations who still come in, clock in on time, do their 9 to 5, take their 19 allotted days of vacation and, live life to the letter. And then you have the younger generations who are flex workers. So they're working from home, home office, or working from a coffee shop. Sidebar, which I did try one day, and that was not my vibe. That was not my thing. It was just too much going on. But, everybody's able to kind of find their place, which sort of increases productivity for the organization as a whole, but it doesn't do well for the blending of the generations. So because, the older generations, they're still clocking in, coming into work. The younger generations, if given the option, are still staying at home and working from home or from wherever they are around the world, because, working remotely, you can work from anywhere. The blending of the generations is not happening. So the sharing of information, the sharing of, skills and assets is not taking place. Frida?
I think intergenerational employees is inevitable. It cannot be avoided. So we're having to actually have managers and leaders who are really not only democratic, but transformative. Many times we get them transactional because it's transactional. You give me, I give you. But what we're really needing is because a democratic says, yes, we'll give you the vote, we'll give you the decision making. Whereas transformative says, where is the need and how do we fulfill it? And so there's a combination that is needed here, particularly in treating people as individuals who have dignity, regardless of the age. And if I see I'm really incompetent at computer things, and I know Craig will often say to me, Frida can't get it, it's Teams now. It was Zoom, it was now Teams. But if we are considerate of the challenges that face different people, and we are still a community, there's no right or wrong, but we can enrich each other's experiences. And that's where I think the diversity comes in challenging and knowing, Frida's going to need extra help on the computers, but I can, get somebody who can come and help me, and they're wonderful. Yet I can work and facilitate interpersonal conflict. And that's where I could be. So it's been able to have that diversity and challenging and using people's strengths that say, hey, wow, the technical things. I'll give you an example in education. APA drives me crazy, but my goodness, I have Zoe on my side. And I send it to Zoe and say, Zoe, just take care of it. This is driving me crazy. And she does within, no time. This is what I mean about using different generations or generational skills that are not so, intensely apt for people of different ages. I mean, example was a previous panel that we just had. We had a 90-year-old who has the most incredible experience, Sue Ellen, but she couldn't get onto the panel. So Lynn had to get a computer of hers and put her on that and be able to get her there. So it's the people who have the skills, we can accommodate each other, and there's no right or wrong or superiority about it.
And I think, I see some of the chat popping up too, and the themes of diversity. I saw the term paralyzing shame. What I think about, even from my own personal experience of that rift, right? There's friction there. I've heard some individuals in older generations say, well, I had to do it this way, so you have to do it this way. Right? I had to go through this trauma and this hard work and put forth this effort. So what makes you any different? Why should you have an easier road? Why should we plow an easier road to get to where I had to get to with all of this hard work? And I think, I say hard work in the sense that hard work looks different for each generation, and it also looks different as technology improves and the tools that we have, the knowledge that we have. All of that comes into play. And if we continue to hold on to this power dynamic of, I've earned this in a specific way, and I expect you to earn it in the same way, when things are changing so quickly and rapidly, not only in the world, but even in workplace culture, that sets us up immediately to have this disconnect, right? This friction that's between us. And I think that's one of the reasons why DEI, to be honest, even amongst those who fall into those marginalized identities, it's this notion of, I had to work at it this way because the world was not accepting of me. So why should that be any different? What's that expectation look like? for you? Why should it be a different expectation? And that's something that we've got to name, we've got to tackle. Steve and I love the idea of the corporate circle because it allows us to name those things so that way we can bring it into fruition. We can objectify it and just completely move it from that conceptual realm into that concrete realm. And you all have already started talking about this next question, which I'm going to direct to Sloane. And it's, what can we do with our current structures? What does that life cycle for these generations look like? And specifically, what does reciprocity between these generations look like? How can we complement each other? So Sloane, take that, and then Frida and Steve, you're open to contribute as well.
I've also been, thanks, Mash. I've also been reading the comments in the chat as well. And there is one that says, just to note that this strikes me as an exclusively white collar work conversation. Blue collar workers never had or have the option to work remotely or work safely from home, or sometimes at all during the pandemic. So I think we were using the pandemic as just one example of how this has springboarded. But when you take, blue collar versus white collar, and you look at the life cycle of an employee, that hasn't really changed when it comes to the generations, right? So the life cycle is attraction to a job, recruitment to that job, the onboarding process, development within that job, retention, and then separation. So where things tend to change within the generational gaps within the work life cycle is retention. So we have our older generations that we mentioned earlier that, are in it for the long haul, longevities, job security. They want to be safe where they are. These are, these generations, they're changing jobs maybe 3 to 4 times in a lifetime. Then comes along millennials and Gen Z. And, at the present moment, I think millennials make up somewhere around like 80% of the present workforce, right? And we usually change jobs 3 to 7 times, more like 5 to 7 times, sorry, before we're 35. Because we get to that retention piece, and employment, I find, for millennials is more personal and more social. So we look for employers that have similar values to what we have as individuals. And so if we don't find that, we move on. So the retention piece is a little bit different for people in the younger generations. So, and that's whether you're a white collar worker or a blue collar worker. If the alignment isn't there, then workers tend to get to that separation piece a little bit faster. Like being content where you are also seems to be a huge issue amongst the younger generations. A word I learned a few years ago was multi-potentialite. Where you are master of many things. You have many interests, and you want to try this for a little bit, and then you want to try that for a little bit, but you don't really stay in one set place for an extended period of time. And again, like I mentioned earlier, our older generations have laid this sturdy, safe, and secure foundation that allows the younger generations the ability to hop around and do these different things because it's safe. Like there's always going to be this safety net of job security because the foundation has already been laid. So when I think of the life cycle of employment, I don't think that there's really any cross section between the generations as far as the life cycles. I do think that they run independently and simultaneously side by side, because the older generations are continuing on this slow, steady, safe path. And we have the younger generations over here that are just running through the motions and sometimes speeding past the older generations, slowing down, pulling back. But there is no real cross section of the actual work life cycles that these generations have. As far as reciprocity, a lot of it comes when there's a meeting of the mind, so to speak. When we have these opportunities for the older generations to school the younger generations, and for the younger generations to say, well, you guys have been doing it this way for so long. What if we tried it this way? And a lot of times the circle, as we refer to in restorative practices, is the perfect place for that, because it's a safe space for older employees to express how they feel about certain things, and a safe space for younger employees to challenge that a little bit and have a positive sort of back and forth until we come to an agreement on something that may work for everybody. So as far as like, you know, the experience and the different approaches, again, multi-generational work teams are amazing for organizations because you have such a vast cross-section of expertise and, you know, different ways to solve problems and things like that, but it has to be managed properly. If it's not managed properly, all of those challenges that Frida brought up earlier start coming into play because we start doubting, we start making assumptions. You know, there's already the assumption that Gen Z can't go 5 seconds without checking their phone, or, you know, the millennials are entitled, and, you know, the baby boomers think they know it all. So there's all of these expectations that we hear from these different generations that have already put up barriers that affect the work life cycle. So I think that for businesses that are looking to increase retention, especially in the younger generations, we have to create a more fluid workplace. And that fluidity is probably going to be very difficult for some of the older generations, but there is benefit in them sharing their knowledge. There's also benefit in them obtaining knowledge. And I like to use like real life, very simple examples. So my grandmother is 80 years old and she has an iPad. She uses this iPad for everything, Facebook, you know, her email, which she never checks, and, you know, all these other things. But whenever she has a problem, she can give us advice on many things. But whenever she has a problem directly related to her iPad, she'll call my son. And they will sit there and argue. I did it this way. And he's like, but Granny, you need to do it this way. Have you tried to do? No, because I was taught to do it this way. And this is the way it has to be done. And he's like, but Granny, we can achieve the same result if you try it this way. So there's a lot of back and forth that goes on until eventually he says, okay, let's try it your way. And she does it her way and it doesn't work. And he says, well, would you mind if we tried it my way? And then they'll try it his way and it works. And then she's like, okay, well, now you have to teach me that way. So I think that, you know, once we get into the space of wanting to learn from each other and being willing and open to learning from each other, the life cycle, the work life cycle will then intersect with each other. And you'll find that the younger generations have a longer retention period because they're interacting with the older generations. And the older generations will most likely, well, they're in for the long haul anyway, but they will definitely have a greater work-life balance because they're interacting and taking lead sometimes from the younger generations. Thanks, Mash.
Absolutely. Frida and Stephen, anything to add?
Go for it, Steve.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, so you just dropped a load there of information and meaning, and what you shared there. It's a complicated cycle, and as I'm also looking at some of the chat, I'm looking at this going, yeah. I mean, one of the questions here is around: is the workplace safe and secure for workers anymore? And my initial recoil to the question, based on my generational experiences, when was it ever safe and secure? Since I've been around, and I'm gonna pick on someone, not out of love, because I don't have love or hate for it. He was an institution. Jack Welch was the CEO of GE from 1981 to 2001, and he instituted, with the philosophy of Milton Friedman, what we came to know as a stacking of performance management, the 10-80-10 rule. 10% of your workforce are going to be high performers. They should be highly rewarded. 80% should be are your average performers. They can stay around, they're productive, and then 10% needs to get fired. This was starting in the early 80s. So, you know, I was just coming into the world, and it became a thing. It took over corporate America, in that now we're looking at transacting And people are no longer people or human. They are widgets with which we accomplish a profit goal, not for their sake or for the sake of the community, but for shareholder value, right? And so I don't know, I would argue that there really has never in my lifetime been workplace safety or security because of practices like this that we have instituted in organizations. And I'll even say I know of even religious organizations that utilize the same thing, that we take people and we stack them 10, 80, 10 so we can make decisions. That takes me to the next point, which kind of brought together something that that Frida shared earlier, and you, Sloane, as well, when Frida said, you know, we have to look at the distinctions of being transactional and being transformative, right? And what I noticed in the workplace as a learning organization, workplaces as learning organizations, are we going to be mentors or are we going to be coaches? And I think that there's a distinction here. For mentors, will tell you, this is what you need to do it like me so you can get to where I am. There's a sense of control. There's also a sense of entitlement and path creating that you were not invited to co-create with me. I'm telling you what to do. So in that transactional conversation, it's the traditional tell, yell, and sell. I'm going to tell you what to do. I'm going to sell you on the idea. And if you're still not listening, I'm going to yell at you. That's transactional. And I think that was the old mentoring model. I think we need to go to a new learning tool in coaching, where we are sharing and discovering, where we are approaching conversations around development in terms of talent acquisition, retention, performance improvement, and also offboarding when the time is right. That is more cyclical, more transformative, and coach-like. And so when we talk about things like giving an opportunity for things to be done differently. I look at, I'm dealing with this right now with a financial institution, high level management, that they're telling me, Stephen, our people just need to follow the process. We have a process that's been proven for over 100 years. Just do what we're telling you to do and you're going to be successful. And these people want to try something new. So I've instituted maybe a different way of looking at this, where I call it the farm and the garden, the industrial farm and the garden. I understand that there's an industrial farm we need to support because we're feeding people, there's jobs at stake and everything else. But then we can also create gardens in the institutions where we carve out small spaces that are safe and secure where people can experiment. Let them experiment and try new things. Let's review, let's monitor, and let's see if we can incorporate that so that we don't throw away the entire farm, but that we give people agency to express and share their wisdom, their experience, and their new thinking. I think that coaching as an art and as a discipline is the better way to go versus mentoring.
Yeah. Coaching, yes, because that empowers. That sharing is, as you said, there's a process that's involved in sharing and thickening the story so that they learn. And it reminds me of a situation I had in South Africa where we had a lot of child-headed households. In other words, we had a community where there was a school and the majority of the children were child-headed households. That means their parents, both parents had died of AIDS. And these children were 8, 9, and 10 looking after 2, 3, 4-year-olds. So they'd hardly come to school and they'd have to go home and they'd have to be parents. And so here, if you look at reciprocity, we got a funder, Netherlands funding, found my department, Child and Youth Care, and gave us money to establish a playground outside of the school, that as the kids came out of school, we could allow them to play. And we had our students engaging with them, connecting, because if you can connect and you can have fun, in other words, relax the muscles, you will not have trauma. You will not have harm. You do not create a need that has to be repaired. And these young child-headed household children were learning to tell stories, to play with instruments. We had all kinds of things going on, And it was being able to do that on a regular basis. It had to be predictable, frequent. I always say the three things we need: consistency, predictability, and unconditional regard. And in that respect, we create an atmosphere where people are not harmed and they can grow up to be citizens that are worthy. So for me, just this reciprocity in terms of bridging the gap. Here are little kids that didn't know what to do. You have funders who know they've got money. You have an organization that actually shows you where we can use it. And in my department in South Africa, I always used to say to my students, you have the privilege of learning, of being educated, but we are going to give 1 day a week throughout the year to an under-resourced community. You're given 2 weeks as a class to find that under-resourced community, because if the students found it, it's theirs. There's that commitment. There's that ownership that Peter Block talks about. There's that invitation to be. And it was amazing the communities the students found, because we would tell them what the skills were that they were going to learn that year. And then they would find the community. And we had the most incredible experiences every year. And at the end of each year, the students had celebrations with communities, and their theory became practice. And I think bridging the gap between different generations and different resources. It's not just people, it's resources and communities that matter. And when we find that systemic ability to connect those, and that's where I think universities are instrumental and should be instrumental in being able to do that. Because if they're going to just stay with the theory, they are going to become obsolete like that traditional generation. And because there's so much online learning, you don't have to go to university. And to Sloane's point, yes, by the time you do computers, you might be obsolete already by the time you get that degree. And this is what I think is going to be the challenge for universities, is to see how they stay current and bridge that gap between the different generations.
Wow. Again, so much learning happening in this room. I have a lot of thoughts, but I am merely the host, but I do want to highlight something that's coming up that we just spoke about, as well as what I'm seeing in the chat, and it kind of leads into the next question, but this idea of safety. And I think Stephen and Sloane, you read that off from the chat. I think it's really interesting how different generations define safety. I think that older generations tend to think of physical safety, especially those who are white and older think of physical safety as safety. The more layers that you have as far as age and going down in age, and the more identities you hold, you then become more likely to think of safety as psychological safety, emotional safety, mental safety, and physical safety. It's not that it replaces, but it's in addition to. And one of the things that's even surfaced for me in my role was the discussion of, what do we mean when we say in policies and procedures, if you don't feel safe, right? If you don't feel safe, keep the front door locked, or if you don't feel safe, do X, Y, and Z. And without that acknowledgement that safety is more than just physical, and without the acknowledgement that that safety may have been jeopardized in the past, your lived experience may have taught you to feel unsafe in certain circumstances or situations, or in certain discussions or connections with various generations. Safety becomes a very tough, difficult topic. And that leads into our next question, which Frida, you use these two terms, and I want to just get a little bit more deep. And I think this will be our last question before we move to the Q&A portion. But you said two words, harm and trauma. And to me, I think about specific things when I hear those two words, especially in the workplace. Workplace trauma is a very common term, but I would love for you to dive a little bit deeper into what your thoughts are specifically between harm versus trauma, and how can that be navigated, especially when we're talking about that safety connection that's in the background.
You know, when I first came to IIRP in 2006, I said to Paul McCall, "What is restorative practice?" And he said, "You know, it really is about relationships. It's about relationships. That's it." And when you look at Paul McCall's causal needs, he says crime creates harm, harm creates needs. Now take away the crime, but harm can be anything that doesn't fulfill the person's developmental needs at the time. So it may be routines and structure, which at an early age we need. It may be being worthy, just being loved, being recognized, being acknowledged at a very early age. And then just being able to feel. How many times do we see a kid crying and we say, "Don't worry"? We don't allow them to cry and to have that feeling and let it pass. We want it to be better. And so for me, harm is when we deny a person their needs of safety, of awareness, and of feeling. And if that need goes unmet for too long or gets repeated constantly, and they have no escape, and this is where many times children have escapes. They learn to be people pleasers, or they learn to blame themselves, or they learn to be defensive. Those are coping strategies in childhood, which then they take to adulthood. And adulthood, they're overachievers, they need to be perfect, otherwise they're not okay. And we have many of those experiences throughout our lives, where we then take our adaptation in childhood to adulthood. But if we don't have that adaptation, we don't have a choice, we go to trauma. Because then we have to actually dissociate. And that is trauma, when we have no choices to adapt. And for me, it's really interesting when we're really working at an early age and at a school age where we see gaps. That's where we need to step in. And that's where I use my relational care ladder. That if we in the family or in the school or in the business find a gap, can we respond to that harm, that because it's created a need, before it goes to a trauma? A trauma means that there's been no escape, and it has been, the duration and intensity has been immense. So it's not the event, it's the internalization that the person has, that they don't have a coping strategy. And that's why systemic work is really important. Can we be adaptable in our organizations? Can we allow interdependency of different organizations to support each other? Can we recycle what is working? And can we actually sustain it and be predictable and consistent?
Thank you, Frida. Sloane or Stephen, any thoughts on that harm versus trauma, especially in the workplace, and how we navigate it?
I think that Frida gave a very succinct response to that question. But just I'm listening and popping over to the chat, and I think that everyone who is posting in the chat, all of your points are valid. So I want to say that first. But like you also mentioned at the beginning of your question, Mash, I think that the younger generations define harm and trauma differently from the older generations. The same way you mentioned, we look at, emotional stability within the workplace differently as well. But again, what that looks like is individual to each person, no matter what generation you are a part of. So how I define harm and trauma may be completely different from how Stephen does or from how Frida does. So I think that it's also, and this is where the policy piece comes into play, because you mentioned that as well, right? How is this defined by workplace policy? And I think that, again, it's on the onus of managers and, the people in more senior positions to have a broader view of what this may look like for everyone.
This is a very deep conversation that has a lot of implications. I don't think we could even start to scratch the surface on a lot of this. The one thing that came up for me as Frida so beautifully presented this continuum here, is in the workplace, how it is that we create recognition plans. Mm-hmm. And because we are such a litigious society, everybody is treated in the same way and recognized in the same way, and we are not meeting needs. Mm-hmm. And so I think we do have, to an extent, our policies and our customs in how we recognize, how we onboard, how we celebrate our employees to fill a gap is manifested in employer satisfaction surveys, in what Gallup does in their satisfaction surveys, looking at actively engaged, and actively disengaged employees. I think that there's a lot to do with unmet needs, the harm, and also trauma. And we continue perpetuating those same systems in the performance, particularly in our performance management processes. It looks like there's an opportunity here to look at this, as you mentioned, Frida, systemically, and to individualize this. Can there be a way we can create a policy in our workplaces that individualizes the recognition that is given, that still frees up organizations, profit and nonprofit, to recognize and fill needs around giving awareness, love, and fairness? I think those are the three I picked up when you mentioned needs, particularly in our recognition plans. You've given me a lot to think about. I'm right now shooting this out there, but this is extremely deep, because this also talks about the relationships that we have with one another as employees and the power structures that exist there. I generally say every human interaction is an exchange of power. Parent, child, sibling to sibling, employee to boss, husband to husband, wife to wife, husband to wife. All of that, they're all teacher to student, they're all exchanges of power. And it looks like in those exchanges, we can do some harm, and it manifests in the work that we do. So I've got a lot of thinking to do. Thank you, Frida.
Well, I just pop in here because I look at the Indigenous Circle of Courage, and I find such wealth in that circle of courage, because it is saying we need belonging, we need mastery, we need independence, and we need generosity. And when we look at those four, many times we in modern society just look at the negatives, the deficits, but we never look at, what are the supports that children need to feel valued? What are the things that we can teach them, a commitment to learning, that they feel empowered? How do we teach them boundaries and expectations so that they can have their own identity? And how do we role model to them so that they can be socially competent in the world. And for me, those are the things that we can do so well when we want to be transformative.
You all are incredible people who I'm so thankful came together for this discussion. So many things, Stephen, to your point, to think about. And there are such deep roots that go into so many areas of life with this. It's just really profound and humbling to think about it with minds such as yourselves and those in the chat who are listening and giving your thoughts. I think, Sloane, you said all of the points in those chats are valid, and it just to me props up why we need to work together and focus on that. So before we keep going, I want to see if there is a chance for Corey to come on to see if there are any Q&As that we would like to pose to our panelists before we wrap up.
Thanks, Mash. And thank you to the panelists, as well as everybody who's in attendance and just really providing some amazing conversation that's going on. I love everybody on the screen. This is such a great conversation and so much more to learn. Yeah, we have some great questions in the chat. I think we're only going to have time for one though. And the questions and answers, we'll be able to post them later, and we'll be able to get back to some of you on some of these answers. But I kind of want to go off of the question that Erica posted. The question is, what would you recommend to address these cultural or generational conflicts in the workplace with respect to boundaries and communications? And if I may add just a little bit to this, thinking about the wide range of employees, right? So again, we have, I come from the Slate Belt region of northeastern Pennsylvania, so there's still some slate quarries that are around. So the slaters that are still doing work, to the C-suiters. What are some things that we can really bring into this that are actual practices that might be applied? And Erica, thank you for the great question. And everybody else, seriously, thank you for the questions.
So Corey, I'll jump and fill the silence gap here. It's hard to talk about actual practices. All I know is I'm going to say that conversations need to happen, right? We need to eradicate that conversational poverty. We need to have the courage to have those conversations and create sacred spaces for the conversations to happen. Now, there are, I'm gonna call them three virtues that I think need to be present for us to start getting into addressing these things and whatever it looks like, right? One of them, by the way, Frida mentioned in terms of looking at the playground, right? And bringing people to play, have fun, and learn together. Those are creative ideas I think we can bring from the childhood into the workplace as adults. The first one I'm going to say is the first virtue is curiosity. The second virtue is care. And when I say care, it's care about and care for. I care about you, Corey, and I care for you, Corey. And I think that needs to happen despite the position you're in any organization. We need to care about and care for. And then the third virtue would be communion. That we have a common union. We have a shared experience, and we are all impacted by our inputs, throughputs, and outputs. And that communion needs to be there, right? So curiosity, care, and communion. The final thing I'll say here is curiosity. Curiosity is often sacrificed on the altar of performance objectives and financial oversight. And I think that we need to start to be a little more curious, be willing to be wrong, not to take in conclusions into conversations and the desire to be right, but to realize that as one, I think it was a Chilean poet that said, I sought out in my life to find the answer. And when I found the answer, I found out that somebody had changed the question. And I think we need to walk into these things with a lot of curiosity, care, and communion.
Mine is the 5 C's, and I know that you use the 4 C's, Steve. But, you know, curiosity, never give advice, ask the question, curiosity. Because in narrative, we want to thicken people's stories. So it's curiosity, being curious, connecting. What did you connect with? And we use compassion for that care. Have compassion. Give a person a piece of your heart, not a piece of your mind.
Yeah.
And community, that engagement with others. And then I've added a 5th C, which I cheated. Encourage, courage. For me, we need courage. And if you look at David Hawkins's book of Power versus Force, he says anything under 10 to the power of 100 will always be force. You always have competition against somebody else. Pride is competition. It will self-destruct eventually. But if you have 10 to the power of 100, you have courage, willingness, neutrality, curiosity. And it's those things that lead me to what I do is compassionate witnessing, listening to people's stories, even teaching at a master's level, students to listen, using the 5 C's. And they wonder why. And after about the 6th week, they get it. We haven't been listening yet. How do we listen? Because we listen, and then we want to put in our own agenda. If you judge, the moment you judge, recognize in your head, you are not listening. And then I also have co-vision groups where I gather people who want to just be able to listen to each other and share. And those are really communities we want to engage in each other's thinking and where we are. So for me, there are many ways you can just have a listening circle. And in South Africa, we used to find it with a gang in Wentworth. There's a gang, and they're really quite antagonistic towards the community. But we used to go and sit there and have something to entice them, like some food, and they'd gather and we'd start listening to their stories. And then they'd realize, oh, we'll be there next week. And suddenly we've got a community that have been perhaps harmed and traumatized in a way in their childhood. But now, oh, we've got a connection, that informal connection that makes sense.
After discussing all of the C's very comprehensively, I don't have any other C's to add. I will say this though. You know, with the curiosity, connecting, compassion, community, courage, care, I also think it's really important for us to remember to take the time to meet people where they are.
Yeah.
You know, and together to grow from that space. A lot of times, you know, it's your way, my way. Just take the time, the care, the compassion, and meet people where they are. Corey, you chose one question, but meeting people where they are actually answers a couple of the questions in the comments. Like, you know, a lot of times we forget that they were where we are, and we will eventually be where they are. So just, you know, coming together, meeting everyone where they are, and growing from that space together, using all of the C's, I think is how we will move forward together as a multi-generational workforce.
Thank you all. A lot of C's to keep in mind. but I agree. And Sloane, to your point, in order to meet people where they are, you need to know where they are first. So ask the question, and that comes back to that curiosity. Ask the question instead of answering it for yourself. So, wow. All right. So we have 5 minutes. I would love to give one more opportunity for our panelists just to say a closing remark. And let's go in the order that we went in at the very beginning for bios. So Steve, Sloane, and Frida, and then I'll close out. But any lingering thoughts, last minute comments? Oh, and Corey, was that a wave to say goodbye off the screen?
Yeah, I'm just gonna go off the screen quietly.
Okay, go off the screen quietly as I just called attention to it.
Yeah.
Meeting people where they are. That's exactly what happens. So Steve, any final thoughts that you have?
One final thought in terms of a particular skill that I think we all need to get better at. And by the way, I'm going to plug. This looks familiar, right, Frida? This is my new read, Frida. This is my new read, and I'm taking it with me on my trips, and I'm reading it slowly and carefully, and we're going to talk about it together over lunch. That is my promise. I've just publicized it to the world.
Thank you.
It's a beautiful read, and you introduced something really powerful right from the beginning in terms of negotiation. And I think that a skill that we all need to start to develop is negotiation, and to break that apart and take it away from the function of an economic discussion into one of a social exchange. Because when we talk about negotiations, generally we talk about opposing parties, adversaries, maybe one who has no longer any need for a particular product and is willing to release it to someone who may not need it, but it's at a bargain price, so they take it anyway. And so we end up with an exchange of meaninglessness, essentially, because the price was right. And you get, you have this tug of war around it. I think we have to get to a more healthy way of looking at negotiations in terms of exchanging wants, exchanging desires, exchanging offers, and exploring concerns with one another. I think that at the heart of that, if we can start negotiating well, it's a skill set I think will help us in creating the space that we want to be in.
Thanks, Stephen. Sloane?
I just want to close by saying that this wasn't just a giving discussion for me. It was very much a learning opportunity as well. I learned from both Stephen and Frida, you as well, Mash, and I definitely learned a ton from the participants that we have in the chat, just seeing the different perspectives and understanding how people feel about this space in different ways. Like Steve mentioned earlier, it gives you a lot to think about. I have my notes. I took notes, guys. I really did. I took notes because this is not a conversation that I want to end here. I want to take this conversation back to my multi-generational workplace. We actually just have someone who's onboarding next week who is younger than me. So, having been the youngest for a really long time, that's going to be a challenge for me because she's going to be coming in with all of her fun and new, and I'm sitting here with my tried and true, right? So I just want to say thank you to the other two panelists and to MASH, and again to the organization for the opportunity to come and learn, because that's exactly what I do today.
Thank you.
Frida.
Thank you, Sloane. Thank you, Steve. I would say my 3 R's: respect self, have reciprocity with others, and role model in organizations the give. What do you give and what do you want to receive? And I think of Friedrich Nietzsche's words, the surest way to corrupt a youth is to instruct him to hold in higher esteem those who think alike than those who think differently. Thanks, Mash.
Absolutely. Thank you. I would just want to give one more thank you to Sloane, Stephen, and Frida for joining us today. It has been just such a beautiful session, and I really appreciate all of it. And thank you for attending, those who have joined us, and to our sponsors, Open Society Foundation and Design Learning, for their generous contributions. A few reminders. So remember to complete your survey right after this session. It should pop up. So please complete your survey. check out our on-demand sessions, our community exhibitor booths, our research poster sessions that are located in your attendee hub. That is the place to go. Stay connected, continue your conversations by joining other events for the rest of today and tomorrow, and include those discussions and those networking opportunities in the small groups, the arts and expression conversations that we had in other panel discussions. So I thank you all very much. It was a beautiful day, and I'm so thankful for everyone who joined. We hope you have a great rest of your evening, wherever you're at, and we will see you next time. So thank you so much. Have a great night.
Okay.